Welcome curious souls to Magically Different Mouse. I'm Katie, and today we're talking about quiet places that you can find here in Disneyland Paris, or at least quieter places you can find in the parks here at Disneyland Paris. Now we're here on quite a busy Friday in June, and if you're someone who suffers a lot with sensory overload, you don't get on well with crowds, the crowds in Disneyland Paris can feel like a lot. So I wanted in this video just to highlight some of those areas that if you need a little bit of a break from the crowds, are good places to come. We're going to start here in the arcades on Main Street. This is Discovery Arcade, and there's Liberty Arcade on the other side of the street. Now the arcades run directly up the back of Main Street, one on each side behind the shops. Now are they the quietest places in the park? No, they're not. However, they're a lot quieter than Main Street itself, and the crowds on Main Street can be a lot. Now they're also particularly good places to come and have fun to see on sunnier days. On rainier days people tend to use them a bit more because they're trying to get out of the rain. And these are actually really good spots to try and get some shelter if you need it, and some shade if you're not getting on with the sun either. And there are some benches in the arcade, there's also toilets on the other side. They can be a bit busy because they're not the biggest toilets in the park. But this is still, if you're on Main Street and you're feeling overwhelmed by the crowds, I need a quick retreat, somewhere that's going to be a bit quieter, the arcades are a really good place to try. The only exception to that, I will say, is during the evening fireworks, when essentially they are being used to move people at the park. They're not going to save you much breathing space then. But other than that, we actually really like the arcades, and also just check out the theming in here because they're really cool. So here's one spot, and we're going to go and highlight some more. The next spot I want to talk about is Boot Hill Cemetery. Now Boot Hill is the graveyard that's at the side of Phantom Manor. It's just a little bit of a walk-through area where they have some kind of graveyard theming. Unfortunately, as we're here at the moment, it's obviously closed for refurbishment. They're doing a lot of work around here at the moment because of the refurbishment of the Molly Brown Riverboat and Big Thunder Mountain, which is across the water from us here. Now, Boot Hill, when you leave Phantom Manor, you do have two options of where you can go. You can either exit straight back into Frontierland, or you can go through Boot Hill Cemetery. The werewolf was telling you to go around Boot Hill because it's actually got some really cool theming in it, including the grave of the Phantom himself that is in Phantom Manor. It can be found in Boot Hill, as well as a grave with a heartbeat coming from it and some slightly innuendo-esque grave, shall we say. But you are going to get some people walking through Boot Hill, but generally speaking it tends to stay pretty quiet in our experience, so it's a good place just to kind of get away from it. And you do also get some really fantastic views down there of Phantom Manor and Big Thunder Mountain and the Molly Brown Riverboat when it's running. Okay, the next spot we're going to pick out, and I think this is a really good one, this is the covered pathway between Frontierland and Adventureland. Now to access this path, as you're entering Frontierland from the main hub of the park, before you walk entirely through the fort, turn right. You'll pass by the back door of the shop, you'll also pass by some loos and a smoking area. And then there's a covered path that runs all the way from Frontierland into Adventureland. It pops you out next to the Curious Giraffe shop. Now, it's the middle afternoon on a busy Friday in June, and we've seen 2 or 3 other families on this path in the entire time we've been here. It is incredibly quiet, and more often than not, the only people we tend to see on this path are cast members. Not only is this a quiet spot, it's also covered. It's actually a covered walkway that runs between Frontierland and Adventureland. It was something that the Imagineers put in here to make sure that people did have some shelter in this park, because they were aware that the Paris weather can be iffy, I think is a polite way to put it. But yeah, we really like this path. We use it as a shortcut a lot if we're trying to get between Frontierland and Adventureland, or even it's a good cut into Adventureland to then run all the way back up towards Pirates of the Caribbean and pop out into Fantasyland. So yeah, the only downside I'd say of this covered walkway is that there's no seats, which is a bit of a shame. I wish there were a couple benches down here. The other thing is that you do pass a kind of a natural smoking area in Frontierland. People do sometimes use this path as a chance to have a bit of a casual smoke without the cast members seeing them, so that's something to bear in mind. But this is a path that we use a lot, and we really recommend if you just want some breathing space, this might actually be your best spot in this park to get it. The only other thing we will say about this path is that when it's running up to fireworks time in the evenings, they will start blocking this path off. That's because the access to the paid area for the fireworks is actually off this path, and the access to the disability entrance is actually just off the entrance of Frontierland. So we don't really want people on this path unless they know we're going to run those points in the park. So that is something to bear in mind. Probably last thing in the evening in the park, it's not one to use, but other than that, we think it's a really great path. Next I want to talk about is Adventure Isle. Now Adventure Isle, for those who don't know, is kind of like a big massive area to explore. There are caves, there are bridges and all sorts. Now most of it is actually shut down at the moment. I believe they're putting in a pirate themed scavenger hunt because we're very close to Pirates of the Caribbean here. So the amount of space in Adventure Isle is currently much less than it is normally. However, I will say with Adventure Isle, when it's fully open, normally you can find a lot of like little hidden paths and nooks and caves that you can actually go and pop in. There's actually a seating area which is very close to the Swiss Family Robinson treehouse, so you've got to go down some stairs to get to. So sadly, these areas don't tend to be very accessible, which is the downside of them. But normally, I would say on Adventure Isle, if you want to get away from the hustle or bustle, the main paths of Adventureland, you can normally find somewhere here that's a little bit quieter, but you can get some breathing space. And also, it's a really fun place for kiddos and people to explore, so we recommend coming to do that too. Also here in Adventureland, on the fort, just outside Pirates of the Caribbean, there are quite a few little kind of hidden paths that you can explore. Now the main path outside Pirates of the Caribbean is always horrible. There's always a lot of people, and it can feel very overwhelming. But if you just come further into the fort bit, you'll find a lot of smaller paths. Again, they're not very accessible. A lot of them are accessible by stairs, which is a really unfortunate thing. But you can find some nice little quieter spots, and actually, you get some really spectacular views here of Skull Rock as well. We're now here in Fantasyland. Now, you are not going to find a lot of quiet spaces here in Fantasyland. It's the busiest land in this park. There's a lot of rides packed into a relatively small area. There's a lot of people. If you are looking for just a bit more breathing space in Fantasyland, then there's this path that runs between It's a Small World and Bellanotte down towards the Castle Hub. The reason this is a bit of a better option is just because it's a very wide path, so it doesn't feel quite as hemmed in as some other bits of Fantasyland, and you can often just pull off to one side for a bit. There are some benches if you're lucky enough to snag one. We will say with this area, if the parade's about to start or is happening, it's not going to be quiet at all because the parade actually kicks off literally in this area. So then it's going to be very busy. But for the rest of the day, we found it's a little bit more of a breathing space in Fantasyland if you need that. Now this path where we currently are is not always open, and this is a path that runs from Fantasyland, kind of next to It's a Small World, to Discoveryland. You'll kind of pop out between Star Tours and Cafe Hyperion. It's actually very close to the entrance of Lounge Lightspeed at the moment, which is the little temporary lounge I've got going for Star Tours. Now, when this path is open, it tends to be reasonably quiet. They normally only open it if they know there's going to be more people in the park and they're trying to move traffic through more quickly. We don't actually know why this has been open for this trip, because we've been here many times in the last few years and this has not ever been opened during the day, and it is now. And we wondered if part of it's because the parade's running quite early at the moment and they can't have this open when the parade's running because it literally starts here. So then they can open it up later in the day. Another part of it might be that they're expecting more traffic in this area because of Lounge Lightspeed being open and because of the music festival happening as well. I mean, it's not going to be completely dead. You're going to have other people down this path, but it's certainly going to be a lot less busy than some of the main paths around. And it's actually a really good cut through between Fantasyland and Discoveryland when it is open. The last spot I'm going to talk about here in Disneyland Park is the pathway we're currently on. We're in Discoveryland now, and this is the pathway that runs behind Space Mountain. So it kind of runs from next to Autopia round to Mickey's PhilharMagic, that theatre, and it kind of loops around the outside. This path tends to be reasonably quiet compared to the rest of Discoveryland, simply because a lot of people are walking around here. It is busier when Space Mountain is open, I have to say, because the photo booth is around this side. So you do tend to get a few more people around here. At the moment when we're here, Space Mountain's actually shut for all refurbishment, and it's kind of dead compared to how it normally is on this path. The thing I will say about this path is that you can get some really nice views of the train as well, so it literally runs along next to us. And there's some benches down here, so if you need somewhere to sit, this actually can be a good option. And one thing I will say is there's no shade and there's no shelter on these benches, so if it's raining or if it's really super hot, it might not be the best place to be, but at least they are here. Okay, so those are a few quieter spots that you can find here in Disneyland Park. Now you might notice that Walt Disney Studios Park hasn't really made an appearance in this video, and that's because sadly, as it stands, I wouldn't say there's any quieter spots in Walt Disney Studios Park. The park's very compact, the path's quite small, and obviously with a lot of construction work going on there, some of the walkways are even smaller than they are normally there, so it's actually kind of difficult to get out of the crowds there. If I was going to say anywhere there, maybe the path that goes down towards Cars Road Trip at the moment comes at the back of Toy Story Land, because the only people there are going to Cars Road Trip and a lot of people just seem to miss it, that it exists. But yeah, I actually think if you're in the studios and you need some breathing space, your best bet is to either go to the front entrance courtyard or to actually exit the park, because outside the park, only going to the village, especially in the middle of the day, it's going to be a lot quieter than inside the park. But I hope that those of you who maybe don't get on with crowds, who suffer from sensory overload, might find this video helpful. We do have a blog all about how to handle sensory overload, and I'll pop it up on this QR code. and also we'll link it down below for those of you who might be viewing this on a mobile, so you can read that as well. And as well as places that you can escape, it's also got some other tips on how to manage sensory overload while you're in the parks. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you like this sort of content, do please subscribe to our channel and ding that alerts bell so you get notified when we put new videos up. And do please also like this video, and it really helps us out. You can also come visit us on our blog, which is magicallydifferentmouths.com. We post up there blogs weekly, which shares tips and tricks for Disneyland Paris, including those aimed at the differently abled, so you might find some really helpful content there. And please do follow us on our socials. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Blue Sky, and we'll link all those down below as well. So thanks very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you real soon. Bye bye.